Welcome to another video, and in this video I'm going to be taking you guys through an Achilles and hip health workshop. You don't need very much space to do it, and equipment wise all you need is a ball, something like a golf ball or a pretty firm ball like this. In fact, this is a dog toy from just an everyday shop that cost me £1. Somebody has asked when I've done this before if a tennis ball is okay, but I find that a tennis ball is a little bit too soft, so you want something that's quite firm. This is a follow along video which lasts just over 20 minutes, and I'd recommend if you can do this routine once or twice a week for the next few weeks, then you should notice some really big improvements in the flexibility and mobility of your ankles and hips. And there's so many benefits of having loose, mobile hips and ankles. Everyday life is just far more comfortable and far easier. You don't need to wear any special kit to do this. In fact, you could even get away with doing this in your pajamas. And I would say if you can do it in bare feet, then absolutely brilliant, because that's going to give you more flexibility and more mobility in your ankles. Ideally, you want to be working on a soft surface, so something like being on grass or carpet is great. But if you can't do that, then grab a mat, because we will be doing quite a lot of work on the floor. And finally, I have created a downloadable PDF document so you can print that off and have the exercises with you at home so you can do them at any time. So with that, let's go through the Achilles and hip health workshop. We'll start by doing a squat test, and we'll do about 30 seconds or about 6 reps of just squatting down, standing up, to just see how your ankles and your hips feel. You can do a little bit of movement in this position if you want. And you're only going as low as what is comfortable and keeping your heels and your full feet onto the ground. So if that means just coming down a little bit, then that's absolutely fine. There's no pressure to go low, but just assessing how everything feels. Just for about 30 seconds, and we're going to do this at the end of the workout as well to retest ourselves. Once we've done 6 reps, we are going to start by doing a toe stretch. So tucking our toes underneath, making sure that our little toe is also tucked under, because that can slip out sometimes. And we're just going to lean back, putting the weight into our feet. That way we're going to stretch the underneath of our feet. But also you can lean back as well and just create a small stretch into your quads, but the main stretch should be felt in the arch of the foot. If that is too intense at any time, you can come out of that stretch, take a few breaths, and then come straight back in. We're going to hold each stretch for 60 seconds. No pressure to push hard, no pressure to go really, really deep into it, just where you can feel enough of a stretch for it to feel comfortable. Once we've done the toe stretch, just gently tucking our feet under and then sitting back on our heels again. And this time we're going to stretch the top of the foot. So by leaning back and lifting our knees off of the ground slightly, we're going to get a gentle stretch into the front of the foot and the front of the ankles. This is quite intense. If you can't do this position because you're getting any pain in your knees, then what you can do is put a block underneath your bottom between the floor and your body, just to create a little bit more of support. If you do need to take a break, then just coming up, taking a break, and then just going straight back into the stretch. This one is quite a subtle stretch, so just take in some deep breaths. You might find the longer you hold it, the more intense it starts to feel. Slowly coming out of this stretch. And next, what we are going to do is mobilize our ankles. So by placing one foot on the floor and then the other leg just wherever's comfortable, we want to lean forward so our knee is tracking over our toes, so we can feel the stretch in our Achilles and in our calf. And then doing 8 to 10 circles in one direction. They're quite small, subtle circles, just making sure that the heel stays on the floor. And then if there's any sticky spots, just sticking around there for a little bit. Once we've gone 8 to 10 circles one way, then we're going to change direction. So you should be feeling this into the Achilles and up into the calf. And the key here is just making sure that you're keeping your heel onto the ground. And you can just leverage your body over onto your leg in order to get a little bit more pressure. After 30 seconds, we'll swap legs and go onto the other leg. So setting yourself up so your knee is tracking over your toes and then pressing your body weight into that leg, spreading your toes out. And then when you're ready, doing 10 small circles one way, keeping that heel on the ground. You might find that one foot or one ankle is much tighter than the other. So just concentrating and sticking around on any sticky spots. And then when you've done 10, we're going to head into the opposite direction. If it loosens up, then just applying a little bit more pressure through that leg, just so you're getting a really good stretch up into your Achilles. You can just stick for a few seconds at the end just to get a static stretch. And then we're going to move into the next part, which is a squat with some movement. And so you just want to come down into a low squat and just moving around, trying to find some mobility. If you do struggle to keep your heels on the ground, then you can prop them up using a pair of shoes, or like me here, standing on the edge of the mat just so your heels are higher up than your toes. Or you can stay quite high into your squat. The key is here is just moving around but keeping your heels flat on the ground. So whatever level you can get to in that squat. Reaching up, pushing your knee out, just finding whatever movement comes natural or intuitive, stretching up to the sky. Doing this for 60 seconds, moving up, moving side to side, and you can even move forward and down, just so you're stretching in all directions. And once we've done that, coming into our next stretch, which is a little bit of a combination of two that we've done previous. So it's our toe stretch, but then we're going to come into back into a squat and then back into the toe stretch. So it's quite a dynamic movement, sitting up and then pressing back into a squat. You can use the floor just to prop you up, or if you don't want to use the floor, you don't need to. And a couple of different variations. If you don't want to sit back into your toe stretch because your knees are hurting, then you can come up onto your knees, press back on the floor and come back into your squat so your heels are touching to the ground. So just squatting as low as you can that's comfortable, and just moving through these two variations for 60 seconds. The next exercise will include our golf ball or any other ball that you've got. A tennis ball doesn't tend to be any good because it's quite hard. And placing this on the floor, you can either do this standing up or you can do it sitting down. You're going to roll that ball underneath your foot from the heel through the arch, the middle of the foot, and you can even apply a little bit of pressure in any sore spots. Moving that ball around for 30 seconds. You can do it for longer if you want. If there's any painful spots, then just sticking around there for even up to 2 to 3 minutes is so good for your foot health. And then swapping over onto the other foot, just rolling backwards and forwards, side to side, round in circles. And then for me particularly, the area around my heel tends to be quite crunchy. So just applying a little bit of extra pressure in that area. And then for this one, I like to use a slightly bigger ball just so I can get a good grip. On the inside of my ankle, I put some pressure down on the ball and then twist it around in a circle just to find any painful, juicy spots, any tender areas that feel quite tight. Up into the back around the heel, which tends to be quite painful on me. And then coming onto the outside of the foot and doing a similar thing. So just below the ankle, around near the heel, pushing that ball in, twisting it around, massaging around that area. If you're struggling with your hip mobility to get in any of these positions, you can do it with your knee just bent up as well. So after 30 seconds working on one foot, coming onto the other foot, and this is another exercise that I'd really recommend doing for far longer than just 30 seconds. It's great to do this sitting in front of the TV just because it's so easy. You could even get away with doing it on the sofa. So working on the inside of the foot and then coming onto the outside of the foot, just finding any sore or tender areas and just concentrating in those particular spots. That was the Achilles, feet and calf part of the routine done. So next we'll move into our hips. So lunging back, placing that arm down onto the floor and then reaching up to the sky, placing our elbow to the ground. And you can also do this using a stool or a chair if you haven't quite got as much mobility. So lunging back, the leg that lunges back, the opposite arm reaches to the sky and then down to the ground. So reaching up, touching that elbow down and coming back. And you want to be able to feel a nice stretch here. You don't want to be pushing it. So this is something that's done 2 to 3 times a week, and you'll slowly notice improvements over the next coming weeks and months. And doing this stretch quite dynamically for 60 seconds. The next exercise is called shin box, so sitting with our knees almost at 90 degrees, and we're just going to swap one side to the other. Depending on your level of mobility, your knees don't have to come all the way to the ground. Just working within your range of movement, and either your hands flat behind you or up on your fingertips, depending on your level of mobility. Then we're going to stick on one side and do 5 to 8 small circles in one direction. Then coming into the other direction, and you might find that there are some sticky spots. Things feel a bit creaky or lumpy, so just go small and go slow. Sticking in that position for just a few seconds at the end. And then we're going to go back into our shin box. This is a really great exercise for a dynamic warm-up, just to get everything loosened up. It's quite rare that we take our hip joints in these ranges of motion. And then we're going to come onto the other side, 5 to 8 small circles in one direction. And you may find that one side feels far more comfortable than the other. I know for me, I can sit on my one side really, really easily, and then as soon as I go to the other, it just feels like a completely different body. Once we've done our small rotations and sat in that position for just a few seconds at the end, we will move into
our hip rotations on all fours. So setting our position up on all fours, a reverse all fours, and then moving our knee out and in. When you're moving your knee in, you just want enough room just so it just misses your other foot. And if you can't take that knee all the way to the floor, then just move in within your range of motion that's comfortable for you. "30 seconds on one side and then 30 seconds on the other. Really twisting at the hip as opposed to twisting at the body in order to rotate that knee in and out. This can be a little bit intense on your wrists, so if you are getting any pain or discomfort during this, just come back, sit up for a few seconds, rotate your wrists, and just take a break. The next exercise is called modified pigeon, which we have done in my mindful prehab workout before. And it is far easier to do this pigeon as opposed to the yoga pigeon, just setting up with one leg at 90 degrees in front of us and then leaning forward. And then pressing that front foot into the ground, a very subtle movement, but pressing that front foot into the ground for 10 reps. And what that does is it just increases your range of movement. You can see the other leg is just tucked in, nice and comfortable, nice and tidy behind me. Once we've done 30 seconds on one side, we'll come into the other side. If you do need a block or a cushion underneath that back knee or that back buttock, then just put it under and be comfortable. Leaning forward for a few seconds and then pushing that foot and that heel into the ground. You can barely see it here on the video, but just an idea of pushing the ground away using that foot. It just allows for the muscles that are being stretched, they're activated, so then when you go back into the stretch, you just get a bit more movement and a bit more range. And then one of my favourites, next up, is the hip flexor stretch. Setting yourself up with one leg forward at 90 degrees. You can see here from the video, front leg is at 90 degrees, back leg is at 90 degrees, and I'm up tall. To increase the stretch, you can lift your arm up so it's the same arm as the back leg. I've got my pelvis tucked. I've got a very, very gentle lean forward and I'm squeezing my back glute, and that will stretch the hip flexors on my back leg. So you can see that I'm not doing a massive lunge. Swapping sides after 30 seconds, setting up at 90 degrees with the front and back leg, tucking my pelvis, squeezing that back glute, and then only if it feels comfortable, lifting up that arm to increase the stretch, keeping my rib cage soft so I'm not flaring, looking like a banana. It's a very subtle stretch. You know when you've got it right. If you're in this stretch and you don't feel it, it's because you're not tucking your pelvis and squeezing your glute. After 30 seconds, gently coming back, and we're coming into a frog pose next. This is quite intense, so being on a soft ground is really, really important. Making sure that your feet are in line with your knees at the back, and then just coming into a stretch which feels comfortable. So if you can't go low, do not go low. After a few seconds in that position, you just want to rock backwards and forwards. It's very likely that you will find some sticky spots, some juicy spots, some painful areas by rocking backwards and forwards. Do that about 10 times And when you've done that, just sticking in that frog pose for a few more seconds. So we want to stay in this pose for 60 seconds in total. The intensity does tend to build over the course of this stretch, so just taking it easy. Coming out of the pose, you want to go nice and slow, nothing fast. Next, we're going to move into our Cossack squats. Essentially, it's a side lunge. But the key here is you want to keep your heels to the floor. So we're not only working our ankles, but we're also working our hips. Staying high if you need to, coming lower if you can. Heels on the floor at all times. Might find that one side is much easier than the other. And just moving across side to side using the floor if you need to. And just sticking around in that lunge just to get maximum stretch in that ankle and in that hip. And just moving side to side for 60 seconds. I've got one side that's far more comfortable than the other. You may even be able to see it in this video. Which one is more comfortable for me? And you can even throw in some cheeky upward stretches if you need to. If you're not coming as low, then you can even rest that elbow on your knee and reach up, just to bring a little bit more range of motion into that move. And the final exercise to finish the sequence is our dynamic squat with squat holds, which we're going to do for the next 60 seconds. So squatting down, standing up, just finding some mobility in that move. And you want to keep your heels to the ground. So if that means not going as low, then definitely don't go as low. You can stick at the bottom for a little bit just to find some openness in that move. You can just move around a little bit. And then after a few reps, just coming into that squat and holding for the remaining 30 seconds. Moving around a little bit if you want. Making sure that your feet are pointing directly forward and that your knees are just tracking a little bit outside of your ankles. Moving around, finding some comfort in that position. And then to finish, standing up, giving the legs a little bit of a shake. And then what we want to do is do our squat retest. So just like we did at the start, setting ourselves up for a squat, coming down, assessing how we feel. Hopefully there's a little bit more mobility and comfort there. It won't be enormous, but by doing this 2 to 3 times a week for a few weeks, then you should definitely notice some improvements. And it's not essential, but I'd say it's a really good idea to take 1 to 2 minutes at the end to lay on your back and let your body absorb all of those exercises you've done and adapt and develop ready for next time.
I really hope that you enjoyed that routine, and by the end of it you should be feeling pretty chilled and your ankles and your hips should be feeling pretty heavenly. And as a reminder, I have created a downloadable PDF which you can get in the description box, which gives you all of the exercises listed out so you can do them anywhere at any time. I do plan on making more videos like this. There's so much stuff that I've got in my head. So if there's anything in particular that you guys want to see, then I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a comment just below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing. And I will put some other videos on screen right now that I think that you might enjoy. And thank you very much for watching.